Times are tight out there, gamers. But there's a way you can save money. It's with a little thing called garbage. A lot of times people don't want their garbage, and you can just take it from them. Or you can take groceries from the store, throw them into the garbage, then tell a clerk, I found this in the garbage. Do I have to pay full price? Most of the time, they'll say no. This is the kind of strategy we'll be using today in our Golgari deck, with Grist, the Voracious Larva, as our commander. That's right, gamers, today we are building a commander deck with Magic the Gathering's most eligible bachelorette, Grist. She's so pretty, isn't she?
That hat makes you look like a girl.
Am I a pretty girl?
Oh, well, you're...
She's a fucking bug. Specifically, we're building the newest Grist from Modern Horizons 3. It is a 1-drop commander, so you can always play it on turn 1, as long as you make sure you have a forest in your land base. It's got Death Touch, so no one should want to swing into it, but the important stuff is on the bottom, in that big old paragraph. Basically, whenever you play Grist or any other creature from your graveyard, you can pay an additional 1 green mana and then flip Grist over and start walking through the plains. The other side of Grist is excellent at putting things in the garbage. But this is actually, I think, our first Planeswalker we've had. So, for those who are new to Magic and just follow this channel because you like me, here's what a Planeswalker is. It's you. You're a Planeswalker. But you can put Planeswalker cards in your deck, and they function as extra players in the narrative of your game of Magic the Gathering. Mechanically, they give you a bunch of different options. The bottom right number is the amount of loyalty counters they have, and then you can spend those loyalty counters or gain loyalty counters by doing a thing in the big block of text. For example, with Grist, you get to add 1 loyalty counter by making a 1/1 little bug. Then you mill 2 cards, and if one of them is a black card, congratulations, you get to put a Death Touch counter on that little bug. The benefit here is the milling. We want to fill our graveyard with a bunch of delicious things that we can reanimate for cheaper. It's a Reanimator deck in Golgari. The best Planeswalkers also have targeted removal, so -2 you get to destroy a target creature or enchantment and handle any problematic thing on the board. Because Grist comes in with 3 loyalty counters, that means the second you flip Grist, you can handle a problem if you need to. Ideally, you want to just hold this up as a threat and keep milling cards. Milling cards is your real goal here. Well, actually your real goal is getting the finale. Most Planeswalkers have a finale. If you can get Grist up to 6, you can -6 her loyalty counters and make a copy of every creature in your graveyard, except it is a 1/1 black and green insect creature instead. So, with that, I hope our strategy has become clear. We are going to put a lot of things in the graveyard. We're going to try and take them out, and if we can't take them out, we are going to copy them with Grist. That's the strategy. That's the goal. And it's a really easy way to play some really big stuff really cheaply. I love playing stuff for cheap. But before we get started, I do want to say that I played this deck on Decked Out. You can go watch and see how it performs. Does it perform well? Do I reanimate a big boy early? Or am I bad at building decks and I should feel bad about who I am as a person? I mean, neither. You should never feel bad if your deck performs badly. That's not an assessment of your value as an individual. But go check out the episode. It was super fun. I love that they had me out there. I wanted to get this episode out so that I could talk about the deck and all the cards that are in the deck if you watched that episode and you came over here. So now let's do that. So first things first, let's fill that graveyard. Haywire Might goes into the graveyard by blowing itself up. It also blows up an artifact or an enchantment you might not like, so it's good removal, and it puts a creature in the graveyard that you can reanimate to hopefully flip your Grist. We talked about Patchwork Beastie in the Strong video. There's actually a lot of overlap with this in the Strong deck. It lets you mill a card at the beginning of your upkeep. Milling's good. Stitcher Supplier mills 3 cards when it comes in and when it dies, so you can always swing with it and hope someone kills it so that it puts itself in the graveyard and also puts 3 more of your cards in the graveyard. Brood Spinner lets you surveil 2 when it enters. Basically, that means you look at the top 2 cards of your library and you can put them in your graveyard if you want, or you can put them back in any order. Maybe you don't want to put the card on the top of your library into your graveyard and you want it in your hand. You can just leave it there. Or you can put 2 more cards into your graveyard. The graveyard's like a big hand. Later, if you're flooded with mana, you can also pay 6 mana to blow it up and make a bunch of 1/1s. I don't think you really need to do that. It's mostly here for the surveil. But blowing it up is good, I guess. That also puts a creature in your graveyard that you can reanimate, if you really are that desperate for that trigger. Nyx Weaver has you mill 2 cards at the beginning of your upkeep. It's like a better Patchwork Beastie, but it also costs 2 more mana. 6 mills 3 cards every time it attacks, and it lets you play permanents from your graveyard by discarding a land. We'll also have a lot of ways to get lands out of the graveyard because, you know, if we're milling, we're gonna mill some lands. And then you won't miss your land drops. That's like my favorite part of this deck, is it doesn't miss its land drops, and that happens to me a lot. I'm very unlucky. Tato Farmer gives you some rad counters. You remember rad counters, right? We talked about them in that strong video. Did you watch the strong video? Please go watch the strong video. It's quite good. It also gets lands out of your graveyard. Carrion Grub mills 4 cards when it hits the board, and it also gets +X+O, where X is the greatest power among creatures in your graveyard, so hopefully you've got something big in there. You should. We have a lot of big things to put in there.
What did he say?
Moldgraph Millipede will be Moldgraph Mill 3 cards as it enters, and then it gets a +1/+1 counter for every other creature card in your graveyard. We're looking for a lot of creatures in the graveyard. Zask the Skittering Swarmlord.
It's actually pronounced Zach.
Lets you play insects and lands from your graveyard, so it's a great way to get things out of your graveyard. But anytime an insect you control dies, you can put that on the bottom of your library and mill 2 cards. Now, it is worth noting that an insect token that goes into your library actually just fizzles out from the game, but you still mill the 2 cards. Strong was the commander of that strong deck we did. That was a strong deck. It gives you a lot of rad counters, but it's also a big creature you can put in your graveyard to reanimate later, or to buff up creatures that care about big creatures in your graveyard. Life from the Loam is a fantastic way to put cards into your graveyard because it has Dredge 3, which means that if it's in your graveyard, you can decide to put it in your hand instead during your draw step, and then mill 3 cards as a punishment. It ain't a punishment, that's what you wanted to do. Then you can put it back in your graveyard by playing it and getting 3 lands from your graveyard back into your hand. It's just a constant cycle of putting lands in your graveyard with the dredge, then taking them out, then milling more and more and more and more and more. Mulch is kind of like that. You look at the top 4 cards of your library, show them to the table, you can put a land card from them into your hand, put the rest into your graveyard. It's not very secretive, but graveyard strategies are never very secretive. Everyone gets to look at your graveyard whenever they want. I don't know what that means narratively, but yeah, they can just check out what bones you got laying around. Bones can't be secrets. Buried Alive is kind of like a tutor, letting you search your library for 3 creature cards and just throw them right into the bin, right into the trash can, just throw them right in the garbage. Like they don't matter to you. But they do matter, because you found them to put them in the garbage. And then, again, ask the manager of the grocery store if that gives you a discount. Grapple with the Past will mill you 3 cards, and then you can take a land card or a creature card and put it into your hand from your graveyard. It doesn't have to be from the cards you milled. It can be any other creature card or land card that you accidentally milled that you didn't want to. Grizzly Salvage lets you reveal the top 5 cards of your library. You can pick a creature and a land and put them into your hand, the rest go into the graveyard. Or you can just put all of them into the graveyard. You don't have to keep them. You can put them all in the graveyard. Hedge Shredder will mill you 2 cards every time it attacks, but also when it's on the battlefield, if a land card would go from your deck to your graveyard, it goes to the battlefield tapped instead. All of this mill synergy is going to flood you with so much mana, you're not going to know what to do with it. Probably one of those things I talked about earlier where I was like, if you're flooded with mana, do this maybe, I guess. Yeah, one of those things. Do that. Crawling Sensation has you mill 2 cards at the beginning of your upkeep. And the first time you mill a non-land card per turn, you also get to make a 1/1 insect. We want it for the milling cards. You could be milling 5 cards at the beginning of your upkeep. With all of these milling at the beginning of your upkeep steps, you could mill 8 cards at the beginning of each upkeep. That's almost 10% of your deck. Black's Vexing Pest was actually the original commander I hardly know for this deck, but I decided to switch it to Grist because I think Grist is a little better. Here's why I wanted Blex to be the commander though. It's because it would put a sorcery in your command zone. Blex is a double-sided card. The other side of the card is a sorcery, the search for Blex. Flip the card over. It's not hard. He's right there. Just turn it. Anyway, you get to look at the top 5 cards of your library and then put any number of those into your hand. That can mean you draw 5 cards. You also lose 3 life for all of the cards you put in your hand, so that could also mean you lose 15 life, but that's a resource, dig it. Or, speaking of digging, dig a big grave and drop all 5 of them into your graveyard, because that's cool. It also puts this sorcery and this creature into your graveyard. So if you have something later that, I don't know, lets you cast spells from your graveyard, you can cast the creature or the sorcery. It's neat. The creature just has good synergy with bugs and spiders and snakes and other creepy crawly type creatures, giving them all +1/+1. It's a pretty flat effect, but you might notice a theme with all the creatures in here. They're insects, they're spiders, they're creepy crawlers. Of course, one Grist is great at putting cards in the graveyard, but what if there was twins?
And twins!
That's right, we're bringing in the original Grist, the Hunger Tide. It counts as a bug while it's in your deck, which means you can tutor for it with things that find creatures. We'll have some of that later. Similar to new Grist, its +1 ability has you milling a cards, but this one only has you mill 1, or starting with 1 at least. You create your 1/1 insect, you mill your card, and if you mill an insect card, you do it again, and then you do it again.
Again!
And each time you do it, you add another loyalty counter, which can make Grist pretty big pretty fast and help get you to her spectacular ult. It's a -5, and each opponent loses life equal to the number of creature cards in your graveyard. This is an ult people forget she has, and if you keep count of your creatures in your graveyard, you can just surprise win. Win cons are fun. I like win cons. And then the middle thing is removal. You gotta sacrifice a creature you control, but she makes bugs, the other Grist makes bugs, you're gonna have a lot of bugs. Also, sacrificing stuff doesn't matter to you. You're gonna get it back out of the graveyard anyway. So now let's get things out of the graveyard. Why put them in the graveyard just to take them out? Well, if you have enough Reanimator stuff or stuff to play spells from your graveyard, if you don't know the shorthand, that basically makes your graveyard a second hand. That's way bigger than the hand you can hold. It's a lot of card advantage, it's a lot of options, and it's options that remain options when there are more options. Because if you have a bunch of Reanimator stuff, you can reanimate something, it dies, and then you reanimate it again, like reheating the same spaghetti 3 nights in a row. You can get Apprentice Necromancer out early for 2 mana, and then pay 1 more mana to bring something out from your graveyard. It gets haste. That's 3 total mana you have spent. Which also means that by turn 3, you could be dropping one of our patented big boys who will be coming later. Eternal Witness takes something from your graveyard and puts it into your hand. It's not quite a Reanimator, but it is good to fish out sorceries or instants you want to cast again. I don't know, maybe to reanimate something. Metamorphosis Fanatic lets you return a creature from your graveyard to the battlefield with a lifelink counter. So not only is it a reanimation, it's better reanimation. Whatever you're reanimating gets better. Also, if you reanimate the Metamorphosis Fanatic, you actually get to reanimate 2 for 1. So you milled them. No big deal. That's actually great. They also have a miracle cost, which is just 2 mana, meaning if you draw them as your first card you drew that turn, you can flash it to everyone and be like, "Hi, I played a cheat code," and then you can pay the cheat code cost for it instead, which can lead to some really silly stuff. But the card's already like good at 6 mana. 6 mana is already good because, well, I mean, we're never paying 6 mana for it, let's be honest, we're reanimating it. But getting it for 2 mana is bananas. 2 mana's bananas. Moldgraph Monstrosity doubles as a big boy. He's an 8/8 with trample. But also when he dies, you get to grab 2 creature cards at random from your graveyard without paying their mana cost. So he's expensive at 7, but remember, we're never paying that. Artisan of Kozilek lets you return a creature card from the graveyard to the battlefield when you cast it. And yeah, it's an Eldrazi again. But it's worth noting this is only on the cast trigger. A lot of reanimate effects specifically just put a creature from your graveyard onto the battlefield. So that's not that good with this. Because that would just get you, you know, a 10/9 with Annihilator 2. Whoop-de-doo, that's not even good. Reanimator as a strategy is named after the spell Reanimate, which costs 1 black mana, lets you put a creature card from a graveyard onto the battlefield under your control. Doesn't actually even have to be your graveyard. You do lose life, equal to the creature's mana value, so if you want to play a big dumpy like the Artisan of Kozilek, you're gonna lose 9 life. But if you put Artisan of Kozilek in the bin on turn 1, and then play this on turn 2, you still have a 9 mana cost creature with Annihilator 2, that's a 10-9 on the board on turn 2. That's worth 9 life. Persist brings a non-legendary creature from your graveyard onto the battlefield under your control. It just has a -1/-1 counter on it. No big deal. You're going to be bringing a big boy out with this. We're looking for big boys. Life, death, ignore the life. We're here for the death. It brings something back Reanimator style. It just costs 1 more mana because there's like another thing on this spell. And also Reanimate. It's a pretty busted card. It shouldn't cost 1 mana. It should cost like 3 mana probably. This still only costs 2. Victimize lets you choose 2 creatures in your graveyard. You gotta sacrifice 1 creature on your board, but you get to get 2 creatures out of the graveyard. Remember those 1/1 bugs you make with Grist? Oh no, we've lost a 1/1 bug, and we got 2 Eldrazi. If there was a second Eldrazi in this deck, there's a third too. Dread Return, pretty simple. Return target creature card from your graveyard to the battlefield. There's no downside, but it costs 4 mana. But it also has Flashback, letting you sacrifice 3 creatures to cast this from your graveyard. Then it goes to exile. But that means you can cast this twice. If you've got, I don't know, a bunch of 1/1 bugs you don't give a shit about. They're expendable. Animate Dead is an aura. It attaches itself to a creature you want to play from a graveyard and gives it -1/-. Oh no. It also makes it easier to remove because if you blow up Animate Dead, that also blows up the creature. The creature needs the Animate Dead out there to be alive, but it's still 2 mana to bring any creature back from any graveyard. So that's pretty silly. Someone else has something good in their graveyard, steal it. That still works for Grist. Walk-in Closet normally lets you play lands from your graveyard. That's the thing I liked about it in Strong. The thing I didn't really care about it in Strong for was the thing that lets you play other spells from your graveyard until the end of turn, and then exile anything that would go to your graveyard that turn. It sounds a little messy, and it's a little expensive. I mean, 5 mana? Who's paying that? You are. Because you're going to have a ton of mana because you're never going to miss a land drop. And if you get Hedge Shredder out there, you're going to have like 20 mana every turn. You're not going to know what to do with it. So you might as well just play your entire graveyard out. 5 mana is nothing. Virtue of Persistence lets you take a creature card at the beginning of your upkeep and take it out of the graveyard, slap it on the board. Doesn't even have to be your graveyard. So many of these things just steal. They steal things from other people's graveyard. I mean, we're deliberately going to put good crap in our graveyard, good, nice compost or whatever. Really, this is just recycling, okay? That's all the Golgari want to do. They just want to recycle. But like, you know, there's 3 other players at the table. They might drop some good stuff too. Steal it. But what, pray tell, are we trying to get out of the graveyard? We are looking for certified big boys. Big boys like the giant Adaphage, a 7/7 with trample, and whenever it does combat damage to a player, you get to make a copy of it, so you can keep making more and more big bugs. We talked about the Artisan of Kozilek, but what about Ulamog, the Ceaseless Hunger? That's right, we're getting some value out of an expensive card we put into Malcolm by playing it again here. Now, normally, when you cast it, you get to exile 2 permanents, and if you do cast Ulamog with your real mana, that's fine, you get to do that. You probably won't get to do that if you're reanimating Ulamog, though. If you reanimate Ulamog, they're not as good. They're just a 10/10 with Indestructible that makes opponents exile 20 cards of their library every time they attack. You know? Mid. Pathrazor of Ulamog has no cast trigger. It just has Annihilator 3. It can't be blocked unless it's by 3 or more creatures, and it's a 9/9. These Annihilator triggers are great things for your bugs to potentially have if they become copies of the creatures in your graveyard with Grist's ultimate ability. Because even if they're 1/1s, they still have that Annihilator trigger. But it also would be cool if they weren't 1/1s, which is why we also have a lot of things to boost up insects and spiders. There are also some spiders in this deck, like Shelob from Lord of the Rings. She gives spiders Death Touch and Ward too, and makes the spiders she controls make copies of things they eat and then turn them into food. It's a lot of stuff, but it's also an 8/8 with Death Touch and Ward 2 that buffs other spiders, like Ishkana, the Graph Widow. They've got Delirium, which basically means count up the card types in your graveyard. If you got that amount, cool, you get an extra effect. This extra effect is creating 3 1/2 spiders. That's a lot of spiders. Then you can pay mana to make a target opponent lose life equal to the number of spiders you control. Hopefully you're making a lot of spiders. There is another way we can make some spiders. Arachnogenesis is a fog. It prevents all combat damage that would be dealt on a turn by non-spider creatures. You also make X 1/2 spider creatures, where X is the number of creatures attacking you. So if you're being swung at by a big person who made a bunch of tokens and went really, really wide, now you went really, really wide. Now you have a lot of spiders. The spiders are here because they play well with insects. There's a lot of other cards like Blex that boost spiders and insects. The Swarm Weaver also does that. +1/+1 and Death Touch to insects and spiders if you got the Delirium. You're gonna have the Delirium. This deck is gonna get delirious. Twitching Doll also makes a lot of spiders. It's also a mana dork. It gives you 1 mana when you tap it. But also when you tap it, you put a counter on it. Then later you can sacrifice it, make a number of 2/2 spiders equal to the number of counters you put on the Twitching Doll. I like it because it's a mana dork. Mana dorks are good. I also like it because it's spiders. Spiders are pretty good. Spiders or insects can be boosted by Patchwork Banner. Probably choose insects. It gives creatures you control of a certain type +1/+1. With all of these buffs stacking together, those tokens you have, those 1/1 insect tokens that Grist is making, or that Grist is making, or that other things are making, because you have so many things that make little tiny tokens, they're all going to be buffed up and could be up to +4. A 5/5 bug is a lot bigger than a 1/1 bug. It's 4 times bigger. +1, that's 5 times bigger. So because we got to reuse so many of the fantastic spells from our monocolored decks, I'm sure this deck will come in under budget. It did not. It's looking at around $143, but that's because lands. Yeah, we're in multicolor territory now, and I want to have a good land base. And this does have a good land base. We got the fetch lands, we got the shock lands, we got all the good lands you could want for Golgari. It's going to be kind of a problem as we go through these 2-color decks, though, that the land base is just going to swell the price of each deck by a considerable amount. Again, though, these are investments for the back half of the series. If you take the 2-color decks and the monocolor decks, that's going to be the front half of the series. And yes, it's going to be quite front loaded. But then we will have a huge library of cards and a huge library of lands so that we only really need to get triomes for the 3-color decks, and then no more lands. There's like no more lands that we'll need after that, because we'll have every land we could possibly need after we hit the triomes for the 3-color lands, which is like 1 extra land we'll have to get. So believe me and trust the process. It will all be fine. And if you really need to save money, remember, just go to the grocery store, throw something in the garbage, and ask for a discount. It works every time. It helps if you cry. Thanks for watching, everybody. If you want to see me play this deck, remember to check out the latest episode of Decked Out. You can support me on Patreon if you want to. That's the best place to do it so that I can buy more Magic cards. That's the most responsible thing I can do with my money, of course. You can also check out Two Lock Time, where we're playing a bunch of new games. Background footage here is from when I did a big old marathon of Marvel Rivals. Tried to get a win with every single character in one day. Is that video up yet? Probably not. They're never up when I plug the Two Lock Time videos. Two Lock the Barbarian also has videos that I'll plug that won't be up by the time this video goes up. We're doing 5e homebrew again. We're going to be starting off with the Barbarian, then probably moving on to the Monk. It's going to be cool stuff. It's all very Kingdom Hearts Bloodborne inspired. And Two Lock and Mango, we're playing Bloodborne over there, I think. That one should be up. The Bloodborne video should be up, as well as a bunch of Elden Ring stuff. So go check that out. Follow me on Twitch if you want to watch me play stuff. If you join the Patreon, you can come play games of Spell Table with me, play Spell Table. Try to do it pretty regularly once a week. So do that. It's fun. Bye-bye. Love you.